Germans that sit there. It's, whew. And then just about the time we came up with a mask, the British done come up with a mask that could affect all that, then the Germans decided to come up with this thing called phosgene. It's the strangest thing I ever heard. How man is so adept at killing ourselves, I don't know. You'd think we could cure some disease or something, but we find good ways to kill each other. Yeah, this phosgene gas is kind of a mixture with the chlorine and some of the mustard elements, but the thing is they put this irritant in it because they realized that the masks were keeping the gas from causing any damage if you got them on. So the Germans, them little, well, I'm a polite company, I probably shouldn't curse, but I'll just say that, man, they came up with a way, they mixed an irritant in with the gas, so when it hits you, you start itching horribly. And the problem with itching is it gets kind of up under your mask, but you want to claw at it so bad that some of the boys, they just take the mask off trying to get it, and at that point they breathe in the bad stuff. War is something else. But anyway, that was gas. But don't worry, as I said, that our army, we got masks. British loaned them to us, or the French loaned them to us. Kind of a scary thing to see in combat, I will admit. I probably should talk about the mask briefly. I've got a couple right here. I have my reserve mask, a little Frenchy mask, makes you look like a grasshopper. And then you have this, this mask that the Americans have designed, but it's based off the British smallpox respirators, what they call it. Normally, when you're in combat, you don't leave it by your side like this, because this would be all in the way. You couldn't get it fast enough, and every second counts when you're with gas. So normally, when you're in combat, you shorten the strap, and it sits right up here on your chest, so it leaves your hands free, so that you can, I don't know, fight with your weapon or something useful like that. But when it sits up here on the chest like this, it's rather interesting. You can open up this bag when the commander gives the order, or you smell gas, and you pull out your wonderful mask that's right up on in here. Now, interestingly enough, they've given me something they call a reproduction here today, because I guess that some of the commanding officers are worried that some of these filters might have some bad stuff still in them. And so they didn't want me to, hurt myself while talking to all of you, so they gave me one of these. So don't be alarmed, but the real things work quite well. And can you imagine you get ordered gas, and the first thing they really scream at you is gas, gas, you got to get it on. But now, can you imagine something that looks like a praying mantis coming at you through the smoke? Good. Oh, I hate these things. Oh, yes, but can you imagine you're in the smoke, you can barely see in front of your face, and guess what comes out of the monstrous mess but a German bug ready to get you. Man, it feels space-age to me, almost like some sort of starship trooper. I mean, it's the scariest thing I've ever done seen, but the masks work quite well if you get them on in time. The filters are apparently the height of military technology. They done taken a whole bunch of animal bones and baked them real good, turned them into charcoal, put them on in there with sand and some other things and some cotton gauze, and made a whole bunch of layers in there, and apparently it works quite well. At least I survived with them. Not too bad, although a lot of our boys didn't do so hot with the masks. Not that they didn't work, but they didn't know how to use them because, well, we only had about 20, 30 minutes at the camps, if that, and when you're on the ship, well, when you're on a ship, that's a hard time to practice, and so most of the guys would have done just fine, but they were too scared when the gas went off, and they panicked, and they didn't get the masks on, and, well, anyway, that's what they had there. Oh, you're probably wondering about the envelope I'm putting on my head. It's a far cry. It doesn't look as fancy probably as, the hats that we had, now that I've shredded it. But, we had a problem. When we switched to these metal helmets, where do you store that thing? Can't store it very well at all. So they actually bought, funny thing is about us Americans is we're willing to reappropriate. Anyone know that word? It means if somebody else comes up with the idea, we just steal it and say it was ours. And, the good news about that is the French police, over there, they had these cool little, like, beret-looking things, these little hats. And we thought those looked like a very clever idea. And so we adopted them. We call them overseas caps because, well, we used them overseas. And the brilliant thing about these little things is that they're really cheap to make, and you can fold them up. And when you fold them up, they can go in a pocket, or you can stick them somewhere, and they're really easy to store. It's really hard to store one of those things. They just get in the way. And I wouldn't want to wear that Brody helmet all day long. It's heavy on the top of your head. Although they tried to make it softer, to be fair. They used some of that new technology, that asbestos stuff. They put it all up there, up in the helmet, make it nice and soft for us. So some of you were looking a little aghast about that. I don't understand why, but anyway, asbestos liners is a beautiful thing. Keeps you a little warm, too. Who knows, maybe I'll start putting them in houses. It's a brilliant idea, I think. I think it worked quite well. Anyway, yeah, so you go out there. Now, let me just say for a moment, this pack is probably the worst thing about Army life. I really hate this pack. They invented this pack in 1910. They call it the Model 1910 equipment set, but I swear whatever numbnut came up with it ain't fit to pour pee out of a boot with instructions written up under the heel. Craziest thing I've done ever seen. I mean, first of all, it cuts blood circulation out of your arms the moment you put it on. And that's bad enough because this blouse that I wear, I barely have enough movement in my arms as it is. And then you put 100 pounds on my back and expect it to all pull on my body. Horrible. Second thing, whatever, man, this might have worked fine when we were fighting the Indians, but who ever thought that I needed this diaper on my back? Who ever thought that I needed a half of a shelter? What good's a half a shelter going to do you to start with? Now, I know they tell me that I'm supposed to find one of my other buddies and button it together and put it together, but you in a trench. That don't do me no good. Most of us, in fact, by the time we got to the trench, we dumped this pack as fast as we could. It was the most useless thing there ever was, and way too heavy to be practical. I mean, we'd be on the march like we could. I mean, have it all put up in this way that they had us do on the ship. That's my rain gear right there, kind of putting a U on the back. It's kind of real nice to put it up there. Oh, and my extra shoes. You can't have enough shoes out there. They wear out quite quickly. We had a lot of problems with foot gear, actually. They sent us over there in them russet boots, those ones they came up with in 1916. And they did okay until you put them in water. Kind of rotted away. So then they decided to borrow a French design again and decided to make these transitional shoes in 1917. Interestingly enough, I saw a pair of them up there in your little museum thing. Whatever. They made them thick. They put 3 layers of leather in there so they wouldn't rot, and they still fell right off your legs. So, they just rotted right off. So then they came up with this other thing in 1918. They added a toe plate, and they put all this metal. They tried everything they could to make these boots last, but they didn't last that long. In fact, I mean, we didn't get a lot of resupply, period. We picked up a lot of stuff where you could find it. Even these uniforms, they gave it to us, and you were supposed to wear them 3 months before you got another one, every day and every night. Well, I hate to say most men didn't live long enough to need another pair, but if you did, you could keep in them. The jodhpurs aren't too bad, the pants, kind of like them riding things that those rich people around Greenville drive around in. Real loose around the waist and really tight in the ankle. Kind of gives you some good support, but I'll say this, oh man, you can't move in this blouse. And the neck, oh man, I don't know who designed this thing. It's such a drab looking uniform. It's kind of funny actually that I called it drab. It just reminded me. It kind of looks like a green olive, something you put in a drink. They kind of made it this way because, up until this point, the U.S. military, we were always in bright blue or red or something else, kind of fighting in lines. But we found out real quick out there with them Indians that you didn't want to stand out. And you don't want to stand out in the war anyway. And so we decided to look like everything else around us. Dirt, trees, grass, the plains. Kind of looks that color, when you're staring out there in Texas and Oklahoma. So we kind of came up with these uniforms. Now, I will admit, the color has changed somewhat. And the reason why it's kind of funny, we don't like to talk about it much, is where we got the dye for these uniforms before we entered the war? From Germany. Kind of hard to get dye from people you're fighting. So all the American companies had to come up with their own. And not one uniform looks alike anymore. Because none of the companies can figure out how to make them look right. Every single one of them is a different shade of something. They call it olive drab. I call it olive stupid. But anyway, they put that there. Anyway, so we had to go over and fight in these uniforms. And they're horrible. For one, bayonet fight. Bayonet. Well, first of all, whose idea was it to put the bayonet there on the back of my pack? Because this is about as far back as I can reach. Anyone notice a problem? I can't get it. So when I'm wearing this whole gig, I either have to drop the entire pack to get it off, or I have to ask my buddy to grab it for me. I almost want to demonstrate something, but I'm terrified of, if anybody gets hurt. They say there's this city in Wisconsin called OSHA, and they're taking over the world and saying you can do certain things and not do certain things. I don't know what Wisconsin has to do with anything, but in any case, maybe I can find someone that... You, sir, you look sane enough, probably not to hurt yourself. Could you do me a favor? Could you stand up? Strange outfit that you have. Could you grab hold of that, and could you pull it straight up, please, and very carefully, because I don't want you to take my ear off with it. Oh, why, thank you, sir. Could you hand that? Excellent, thank you. I'm so glad to have assistance here. Yeah, see, so most of the time when we're actually in combat, we take that little case that it's on the scabbard, we put it off and put it on our belt. Kind of hard when you get on the ground, but it sure beats doing this the whole time, going, excuse me, I need just a minute. Doesn't work very well. Well, you know, speaking of not working very well, bayonets don't work very well either. Now, I know they look scary. You hook it up on the end, you basically make one giant pike. Kind of nice, but they didn't think about something. That works all fine, well, and good when you're out charging, you're out over the open ground, but when you get in a trench, you got a problem. There's dirt walls or wooden walls on either side of it, and you don't have a lot of room to move with something that's about 5 feet long. Unless they're right smack in front of you, you have a hard time doing much of anything with it. Somehow I think these will probably be obsolete one day, but I guess they're kind of a holdover from the age where everybody would stand in the line and charge at each other. Again, can you imagine how scary this would be with a bug face attached to it? Woo-wee! Yeah, big piece of metal. Most of the time we use it to stab cans to get food out of them and other things like that. You know, useful things that the Army didn't bother to come up with a way for us to deal with. It tends to be how it always is. But I'm going on and on about stuff you probably don't care about. You want to know even more about the war. Well, I guess the thing everyone's talking about with the 30th is that we broke the Siegfried line. You know, well, I guess that's what the Germans called it. We called it the Hindenburg line after their Mr. Boss Man. The guy, some big fat Prussian man that sits in the back and came up with all the reasons and ideas to destroy the Europe, I suppose. Yeah, we broke the Hindenburg line. That was a hard day, too. I still remember it. First of all, they put us under command of Mr. General Haig. Now, I'm sure you've read in the papers about that man. That man, I swear, is incompetent. I mean, just slaughtering. I mean, he was there at the Somme, and the amount of Brits that they lost there and the buffs, man, the Canadians don't speak very highly of him at all either. But I guess, you know, I had 6 weeks on the ship coming back to think about it. You know, we kind of pick on them generals, but I'll give them a teeny bit of a pass. You know, it's hard fighting in the First World War to be a general. You know, up until this point, it used to be easy. They sit on a horse, or they'd do something like that, and they'd be on the battlefield with you. They could go up onto a hill, and they could overlook the battle, and they could give commands. Well, that's awful hard to do when your battle line is now no longer just a mile. It's about 200 miles long, and most of your men are sitting down in a trench, or more than that, they have to go into the smoke and into the shells and the battlefield and the craters, and nothing looks familiar anymore. You don't have any landmarks. You can't really tell what anything is. It's so bombed out. And that, how do they communicate? You can't send runners. We've tried that before, but, you know, the runners get picked off by snipers, or more than that, they get lost more often than not, because, you know, when you started the attack, it looked one way. By the time the German artillery's done, it looked like something else. You don't know what direction you came from. And on top of that, you know, they did have guys with the telegraph wire. They had big spools on them, and they try and run them behind them, but the problem is that get blown up quite easy. Real easy it gets blown up. And so that's a real problem too, because then you're just sitting there telegraphing to nobody on the other side. Probably the most effective thing them generals had was something called a carrier pigeon. They carried these little birds in packages on their back. The miners liked them too, because if they had too much carbon monoxide down there, the bird would die first and you knew to get out. But for those of us on the ground, you know, we didn't have that concern. But you could write little messages and tie it to their legs, and they'd fly it back to headquarters. They were trained to do that. There was actually even one bird that helped save our lost battalion you might have heard of there in the Argonne Forest. I think they awarded it some medal, something like that. Bird got shot up pretty bad, but he got the message through. So to be fair to the commanders, I guess it's pretty hard to be a commander. I still think they're incompetent, but as far as commanders go, I guess they had a hard time communicating, making things work. Oh, but man, did we have a better commander. See, because we fought with the Australians, with the diggers, they call them. I don't know if they call them that because they were really fast at digging ditches or what, but they could dig and they could fight. And we got to fight with the Aussies, and their general was a guy named Monash. Very fine gentleman. That man had proven himself at Gallipoli. He had proven that he was a strategist. He was a man that wouldn't waste lives unnecessarily. In fact, the morning of the attack, I can remember the Australians were supposed to be the ones to do the attack, but they lost so many of their number. So many of them have died, they didn't have much of the strength at all. They didn't think they'd last when they hit the line. So they turned to us, 30th Division, us fresh Yanks, as they called them, and they said, you go and attack. You can go and attack and take the line. So that's exactly what we did. We got ready in the morning to follow after a creeping barrage, which is the fancy thing they came up with. Creeping barrage simply means the artillery, you have to time it really well. They fire just in front of you. So you can't walk too fast, you get blown up by your own artillery. And you can't walk too far behind, because if you're too far behind, by the time the artillery moves along, the Germans pop up and shoot you. So you have to time it by the watch. Well, strangest invention. Mostly ladies used to wear these before the war. Us men of repute, you know, we would wear pocket, you know, well, we'd carry our pocket watches on us. But the problem is in a war where you've got to time everything, where it's 200 miles and you can't see each other, and you don't want to get killed by your own artillery, you have to make sure everybody's got a watch so that you can make sure it's on the same time. So you can make sure you know when you've done artillery's done shooting, and you know when to move forward. So we always put that, these men got really brilliant. Really quick, I'm going to take this off before I stab myself with it. It's getting awful hard to handle. But, right, we'd have to keep our watches on us and get ready for the assault. Our commanders would watch that and then blow them whistles. One of the worst things you could ever hear was that whistle that said you had to leave the safety of your trench and go up above. Well, that morning of the attack, it was foggy. It was real foggy. And the only thing I can say about fog is it was probably as bad as it was for us, it was actually good for us too, because we thought we couldn't see where we were going. The Germans sure couldn't see what was coming neither. And that was probably about the only help we had, because the Brits had these things called tanks. It's amazing all the technology this war has brought about, tanks. When I first heard that, I thought it was something to bring water up to us. And well, Lord knows we needed water. No, it wasn't that at all, although apparently that's why they were called that. The Brits wanted people to think that they were water-carrying devices. No, these tanks, these big things on tractor motors, like 18 people sitting in them behemoths. The big Mark IVs and things like that. Huge, slow as dirt. I swear a slug could move faster under threat of penalty. Man, it's the worst thing ever. Those things came to the starting line, and as good as those things are for crushing barbed wire, which is very useful, don't get me wrong, half of them break down before they even start. What good is a device that just sits there? All it does is make one big target for the Germans. But in any case, they sent us tanks, and they sent them forward, and it was good that they sent them forward too, because the Hindenburg line ain't just a line. No, it sounds like a line, but it's really a series of lines about 2 miles deep. And it starts with this big set of barbed wire that's about 40 feet tall and 50 feet deep. And the problem with barbed wire is that you can hit it with artillery, and all it does is make bigger tangles. You can't kill the stuff. You can't blow it up. They used it to keep cattle in Texas in place, and now all it does is keep people in place. Worst thing ever. But that's what we like them tanks for, because those tanks will hit that stuff and they'll flatten it like it was a piece of paper. Very useful when you see a tank. But anyway, the attack began 5:30 in the morning. Our artillery went off like clockwork. Ooh, it's always good to hear the artillery going out, not coming in. It went out there and they pounded that line, and then slowly we went up over the top and we started moving. And I hate to tell you, but we were about as all discombobulated as soon as that started as when it went off. Soon in that fog, we couldn't see anything. We lost sight of each other. There were groups of men wandering all over the battlefield. There were 10 or 15 men in that shell hole over there. There was 30 over there. There was 2 guys over there. And it kind of descended into chaos. Me, myself, I got lost personally with my bud. I didn't know where we were going. The final thing that let us know what direction to go was out of the fog came one of them tanks that was still working, and we just figured whatever direction it was going, we should follow. So we kind of climbed up in behind it, and we just kind of walked behind it till we got to the line. So it got us through the barbed wire, okay, but when you got through the barbed wire, then there were these machine gun emplacements, these pillboxes, they call them, that the Germans had put. They had this thing called depth defense, where they kind of retreat on purpose and cause you to come into these lines, and then they had killing fields set up to just mow us down. It was horrible. We had to fight our way through these MG turrets. And then the worst thing is by the time we got through the machine guns, when you know we got to the other side, there was the St. Quentin Canal. There was a whole big river we had to cross. And not just a river like you just had to swim with all of this, as if you could do it with all of this. It was a river that was way down in this canal. It was like 40 feet high on either side was the embankment. The whole time the Germans shooting at you. We had to go all the way down one side, fight up. In fact, there was one German regiment that built themselves some sort of brick wall up in this part of the canal that went under St. Quentin, and they had machine guns up in there, and they just shoot at you from the side. It was horrible, but and I'm now bragging just a little bit. I'll let you know, we got up the other side of that embankment, and we broke through that line. In fact, we were kind of all excited that we broke the line, that we kept going. We just kept pushing. We took over a mile. That was the furthest anybody managed to break through that supposed impregnable line. It was like hunting Huns. I mean, all we needed was some sauerkraut and some sausage, and we probably would have got them all coming out of their holes. It would have been so easy. maybe a peanut game, you know, something like that to get their attention. But we kept going. We went so far they had to send the diggers after us. You know, them Australians that were supposed to do the fight, they came up after us and said, "You Yanks had better stop, Mike. You got to stop. You're going to go so far. You're going to be on the range of artillery." All right? So we stopped. And we made it the furthest either. Now, to be fair to our 27th Division friends in New York, they didn't quite make it as far as we did. But, and I know a lot of people fault them for it, but them New York boys showed themselves brave. Let me tell you, for one, they started a half-mile further back than we did. And second of all, the British didn't do them such a good job of banging the artillery out forward. And they all got mired down, too, in that barbed wire, and half their tanks didn't work neither. So I can't really blame them. They made a lot of progress for what they were. But it was us 30th boys that broke that line. Let me tell you, we broke it. We broke it all the way through. It was almost as if Berlin was on the other side of that line. It would have been great. We were in such happy spirits when that was done. They called us out of the line after that, thank be, because we took a lot of casualties. There was over 1,000 of us didn't make it back that morning. And it's a miracle that we even made it as far as we did in the chaos. But let me tell you, we broke that line. And it wasn't too many months later, as you know, there was an armistice. Them Huns surrendered. I think they knew that we were all coming. There was more and more of us coming every day. There were over 40,000 Americans a week showing up in France at that point. And I think they saw the writing on the wall. We thought we were going to get to fight in 1919, too. We were getting ready for the spring offensive, is what they were calling it. They had all sorts of cool technology they were going to let us use. Now, man, we were fixing all them stuff them Europeans thought they had. They had this thing called the show. Ah, big piece of junk. Well, I guess not the one that the French made. We tried to make this 30-06 version, you know, our ammunition, and we didn't understand metric very well, so they built it wrong. Thing didn't work. You could use it as a club. But, man, Mr. Browning, oh, man, he came up with this thing called the Browning Automatic Rifle, or the BAR. Oh, I was so looking forward to getting one of those things. Only a few units had them, but the war ended, I guess, before they got to mass distribute them. Oh, well, it would have been interesting to see. They had this thing called the Pedersen device, too, but I ain't even going to get started on that. The idea that you could make your rifle fire like a pistol. What a crazy idea. But anyway, yeah, they pulled us off the line, and we relaxed as best we could and licked our wounds. And then, well, it was the last week of the war. That was probably the craziest time for us, because the Germans had been retreating then for weeks at that point. Every time we seemed to make contact with them, they kept going back. I swear the only difference between advancing in the German army was what direction, and they were advancing to the rear. They just kept going, and they kept going. But that last couple of days, we knew they were going to sign an armistice. Everyone had been talking about it. The papers had been talking about it. In fact, 2 days before they even signed the armistice, I heard the yellow journalists, you know, publishing all their fake news and stuff. You know, they even said that they'd already signed the armistice 2 days before they did. There was a whole parade in New York City because everyone was so excited. Well, of course, you know, everybody that was anybody knew they hadn't signed it. I remember hearing reports that Woodrow Wilson, our president, he was sitting up there in the White House, and the whole crowd was outside the White House demanding him give a victory speech. Well, he knew better because the War Department told him the Germans ain't signing nothing. So he just stayed hidden in there like a coward because he couldn't come out and tell the people they hadn't surrendered. But I remember that last day, they said they were going to stop in November, the 11th month, on the 11th day of the month at 11 a.m. Easy for everybody to remember, even those dumb recruits. 11, 11, 11. But the problem is everybody knew that's when it was supposed to stop. And can you imagine that last day? Our good-for-nothing officers said we had to keep fighting. But we knew the war was going to end. It was only a couple of hours before it was going to end, and some of these commanders kept fighting. They kept calling us out of the trenches and making us attack. There was one sad account I heard tell of a guy further down the line in the Argonne sector. It was the saddest thing. It was 10:59 a.m. The war was going to be over in 60 seconds. And some poor lad, I guess from Illinois, went crawling out of his trench and went charging at a German machine gun nest. And I talked to one of the guys in the docks in France. He told me he was there for this story, and I have no reason not to believe him yet. And he said he saw it, and that boy went charging at the machine gun nest. And he said it was the strangest thing because the German that was manning it was waving his arms as if almost trying to tell the guy to leave, to go turn around. What was the point? And man, that, you know, us Americans, we fight. And he kept charging, and the German at one point stood up and was waving his arms trying to get the boy to stop, and the boy wouldn't. And when the German figured out that he wasn't going to stop, he sat back down and opened up with the machine gun and killed that lad. killed him. Probably 20 seconds left in the war. And then it was over. As I said, it was so quiet. So quiet. All quiet, that you might say, on the Western Front. That was the strangest thing about it, the silence. The whole time we've been there, there was never any silence. Even when you were behind the lines, you could hear the light rumble like thunder in the distance at the front. Strange time it was. One of the strangest things for me was the experience of riding back. That's right, I got to ride back, and not on no horse neither. I got to ride in one of them newfangled automobiles. I got to ride in one of them, what do they call it, them Dodge trucks. Oh, it was the coolest thing ever. Man, that thing was cool. So was the gentleman that helped me ride in it. Oh, man, I was kind of like them ambulance volunteers, I guess, with the French or whatever. Can you imagine? We went to war with horses and mules. By the end of it, we had trucks and cars. Such a strange period. It was really hard on them, too, because the wheels were wood like wagon, and some of the ruts there in the dirt would get so deep that the wheels would hit it and break. It was hard for some of them car people, but it was kind of cool to ride on one, because if nothing else, I didn't have to use my feet. That was really useful, too. They rode us all the way back from the front, which kind of fun to ride, but let me tell you, it's a little cramped in the back. Every time they'd hit a rut, you'd hit your head on the top part of the vehicle. Oh man, technology, quite a ways to go, I guess. Nothing like sitting on the back of a gas tank either. They said that whole thing was the fuel that made it run. Good thing the Germans weren't shooting no more. If they hit that, woo, it'd be a hot day, wouldn't it? Anyway, then they got us on the ship, and they brought us back. And now we're back here in Greenville. And a lot has changed, it seems. And here I am. And they asked me to say what I think of this war. Well, I don't know. War is madness, if you ask me. The whole thing's ridiculous. If you ask me and a lot of the boys, honestly, we thought the best way to solve the war would have been to take all them leaders from the French and the British and the Germans and even Woodrow Wilson himself, strip them out of all their clothes, leave them in their underwear, put them in the middle of one big field with clubs and let them beat each other. And whichever one won, they'd win the war. That's about as much as we cared about it. But war is madness. Because if you ever notice that war is always fought by the people that didn't decide for it. It's always those young ones that have to go fight it while all them old politicians sit up there and come up with it. And it was really difficult because a lot of us didn't even want to be in this war. America was a very divided country. I'm sure it's not the same for you, but our country was very divided at the time. Very, very contentious. There was a lot of immigrants. You know, we were a nation only of 100 million people, and over 15 million of them were immigrants that had just showed up from Germany, from Austria-Hungary, from them Turks, you know, those Muslims that are coming out of the east there, and Jews and Italians, and there was a lot of people that didn't sure if you didn't quite look like us, but, well, you know, we were a little suspect of you. And you know, up until the war, whenever we went to war, Americans would just volunteer, like the Rough Riders, like Teddy Roosevelt, you know, who ran in the last presidential election. Man, you know, it was kind of rough. I voted for him, to be honest. I voted for that dear Republican. Actually, you know, at that point, he wasn't even a Republican. He had split off and make his own ticket because the Republicans wouldn't even take him. That Democrat, that Woodrow Wilson, thought he was going to run. Strangest campaign ever, the campaign in 1916. That man barely won. He ran on something called the America First platform. Everything about America this and America that, and America needed to be first. And, you know, he lost his own home state of New York. The only reason that man won was something called the Electoral College, which I can't fully understand either, but he won because California had 4,000 votes. Can you imagine the state of California, some coast out in California making a decision for me for president, but I guess that's how democracy works. 4,000 votes, and there you go. Democrat's the president. He won re-election. Huh. But we got him in the midterms, or I guess you guys got him in the midterms. I was overseas at the time. You know, the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives by 2 seats. Oh, man, that's going to be tough for Mr. Wilson to get anything passed for his 14 points apiece now that the Republicans control the House. Oh, man, but politicians are neither here nor there. I guess the thing that really strikes me about the war is the comradeship. You know, when you're over there in the trenches, you realize that you're all human. Every last one of them. We make fun of the buffs, we make fun of the frogs, you know, the Frenchies. We make fun of them all, but they're all human beings. They all have desires and hopes and dreams and family and loved ones and sweethearts. Maybe sweethearts and loved ones never meet. And, you know, the funny thing about that is that at the end of the day, we were all just as scared. We were all just as hungry. And we're all just as concerned about what are we doing here? Why are we even fighting for this? You know, I know the president, Woodrow Wilson, has been talking a whole lot about peace and freedom and making the world safe for democracy, and that sounds pretty good to me. But I guess the thing that just concerns me is that we're sitting there talking about freedom and democracy, and yet at the same time, I feel like in the name of democracy overseas, we're losing it at home. Now, I mean, I know we're still free right now, and I'm very thankful for that, but I know there was a lot of turmoil in these last couple of years. Americans turning on Americans, people reporting each other because they had German-sounding last names, or they didn't look like they were from here originally, or I know a lot of places they were even renaming stuff. You had to call it Liberty Cabbage instead of sauerkraut because, you know, we wouldn't want a German name. And a lot of turmoil. I even heard of one gentleman with a German-sounding name that had grown up here his whole life, and they lynched the man, thought he was a spy. The only thing I think was that somebody was mad he didn't give him a good price at his cobbler shop. But in any case, all that happened, all the turmoil, and then of course on top of that, all the Espionage Act and all the papers can't publish what they want because they might be against the government and censorship of this, that, and the other. And I mean, I suppose the government knows what it's talking about. I'm just a local, I don't know, but I do know one of the worst things I can remember, and I'll finish up with this. I can remember one of the hardest things to see was, and this is weird, and I don't know how many people it'd be safe for me to even say this bit, you know, all the Negroes that they drafted. You know, when they couldn't get enough of us volunteers, so they passed the National Selective Service Act, or the draft, in 1917. And a lot of us weren't too happy about that because we didn't want to be involved in no war in Europe, and they just took us anyway. But, you know, the law said all the able-bodied men from 18 to 30 had to report. The only thing that politicians didn't think about is able-bodied men apparently also include darkies. And they drafted every single one of them. I know there was a lot of turmoil here in the upstate, especially up in Spartanburg, just a few miles up the road, when that 369th, and what do they call them now, the Hellfighters, Harlem Hellfighters or whatever, they showed up in Spartanburg. They lasted no more than 2 weeks because they nearly had a lynching. It was horrible. You know, there were a lot of people in South Carolina who weren't too happy about the idea of no Negroes coming down here to train, but I guess that's neither here nor there. I wasn't very happy with the idea of them coming neither, so I don't really have a lot of room to talk, but I do remember when we went over to Europe, we gave them all to the French if they wanted to do anything, because I guess the French didn't care what color your skin was, because they had Senegalese and North African troops they were used to, but I remember getting this pamphlet. The reason that, I don't know why that's on my mind, I remember getting this pamphlet. The Army passed it out. I guess it was originally for the French Army, but I got one of them, and when you're in the trenches and have time on your hands, you love to read. It was this document called Secret Information Concerning Black American Troops, or SICBAT. It was a very interesting document, published in French and in English, and they handed it out, and they told them Frenchies that they shouldn't be nice to anybody of the colors. Shouldn't be nice to them at all. They said, don't, in fact, the document said don't shake their hands, don't compliment them, don't even eat with them. It said if you did any of them things, it'd make them darkies think more highly of themselves than they should have. It'd be dangerous to American society when they got back. In fact, there was one document there, I remember it, first paragraph of the document said that black troops alone had been accused of more rapes than the entirety of the rest of the Army. I don't know if that was true or not. I don't think they'd been there any longer than us, and all of us have the urge for the flesh of a woman, I suppose. None of us wanted to die without the sweet embrace of a woman. But, you know, I noticed that men fought all right. They seemed to fight just like us. And that, I guess, brings me back full circle to what I was saying before. When you're over in war, the thing you realize is all you have is each other. It doesn't matter how stupid you are, where you came from, or what country you're from, or your education level, or what you even think about your skin color. At the end of the day, all we had was each other. The only way we broke the Hindenburg line was with each other. Everybody putting 2 feet in front of the other and fighting even though we didn't want to. Though we were scared to death. All we had was each other. And I guess what I'm trying to say is if I talk about the war, I just hope that what we fought for wouldn't have been in vain here. I just hope that we as Americans would realize we can disagree on politics and we can disagree on whether we should be in the war or not. We can disagree on a whole bunch of things and we can even hate on the press. Heaven knows I don't like that Mr. Pulitzer. Oh, good grief, what a fool. But the point is, we're Americans. And freedom costs something. A lot of my buddies didn't come back because we were fighting for freedom. Freedom admittedly for French and Belgians and Bulgarians and Germans and Austrians and a whole lot of them. But we thought that every man should have, and woman should have the right to make a choice. You can make stupid choices, but it's your choice to make. You can make choices. And I guess I just hope now that I'm back, and hopefully now that war fever will begin to dissipate and everything will go back to normal here in Greenville, I just hope we remember that everybody should have the right to make choices. Everybody should have the right to live and let live and choose how they want to do as long as it ain't interfering with no one else. Maybe that's not a popular opinion, but that's the best I can think of to say about a war. Because I think as long as we take care of each other and look out for one another and treat each other with respect, it'll make this war worth it. Maybe truly it will be the war to end all wars. I really hope that's the case, because I never want to see something as bad as what I've just seen. I never want to see it again. Never want to see it again. And do remember them veterans, too. Do remember every single one of us that come back. Because while we might look like we're in one piece, I think the one thing nobody ever understands is that we carry the war with us up in here. Oftentimes at night or in privacy of our own homes or our vehicles or in our farmland, we can't talk to many people about it. I don't think people would understand. It's such a weird way of life. Everything seems so real. Everything seems so important in the trenches. And that's probably the one thing that's most difficult for me already being back a short time is life seems so dull. Life seems so boring. You all just continue as normal, and it's really hard to enjoy normal. I just got back from a place where every decision had life or death consequences. And here, half our decisions are just what donut I want to eat. I mean, I guess those are fair and good, but just remember to make wise choices. There's a lot of men that didn't come back, and a lot of men that are back but aren't with it. They left themselves over there so that you and I can have the chance to make a better life. So, what do I think of the war? I think it should be remembered, if for nothing else, so that nobody will ever do it again. War is hell. War is hell, and there's nothing more I can say about it. So, since there's nothing more I can say about it, I guess I should be off. But I do appreciate that some of you Americans already are interested in what happened, although it kind of breaks my heart that so few, because I mean, the war only just ended. The fact that people moved on so quickly. That's why I appreciate all them organizations like the YMCA, Salvation Army, others. There's even this thing called Upstate Warrior Solution or something like that. They're always looking out for all them soldiers that come back and have a lot of problems, but no one's looking for them. Make sure they don't kill themselves or do anything crazy. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate all you being interested. So enjoy the freedom that you got. And if you enjoy it and make wise choices every single day, well then, it's been worth it. Well, that being said, I guess I should be off. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'm going to get out of here. I want to go home.